listening to Best Served Cold, a Born Millennials podcast, the Australian true crime podcast where we drink wine and talk about crime.
Formerly Egypt's 36th most popular true crime podcast, hosted by Tama J and Laura Elise.
Sit down, relax, grab a drink, and enjoy this week's episode.
Yeah.
Hello.
Why are you laughing?
Welcome. I'm laughing at my own joke that I'm about to say.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm really funny.
You think you're very funny.
sometimes.
You think you're clever, don't you?
You think you're clever, don't you? Anyway,
Welcome
hello,
back.
welcome back to another episode of Best So Cold, the true crime podcast where we drink wine. Sorry, I'm going to get it together and say this joke. The true crime podcast where we drink wine and talk about crime. I'm one of your excellent co-hosts, Laura Elise, and there's no disputing that today I'm covering
That's terrible.
Rasputin.
That's so bad. I can't believe you're also breaking so hard on that. And your job is to talk on a show and you're like, you can't speak.
Take two.
Take two.
I'm one of your amazing co-hosts, Laura Elise, and there's no disputing that today I'm covering Rasputin.
Wow.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that anyway. What did you come up with?
I didn't have anything.
Well, there you go.
Great.
So don't shit on mine.
So I'm just going to say I'm Tama Tor. I'm the other half of Best Served Cold. My tag isn't as great as Laura's.
That damn straight.
Let's not compare tag sizes.
Anyway, welcome to another episode. If you're new around here, welcome to the community.
Welcome.
We like to do a little disclaimer at the start of each episode where we say that we tend to swear a lot on this show. So if you are someone who doesn't like swears, we would very kindly ask that you fuck off and not leave us a 1-star review.
Yep. Goodbye.
Anyway, I don't think I have no housekeeping aside from saying follow us on socials.
Yeah.
At the BSC podcast.
Things have been a bit hectic just because the lockdown's sort of ending and we're all getting back into regular life. So things might be a bit slower on the social sides for a bit, but we'll
We're
get
doing our
back
best,
into it.
guys.
Yeah.
We're doing our best.
Yeah. Apart from that, yeah, welcome to the show and let's just dive right into it. It is probably my turn, I guess.
It's my turn to
It's
go
your
first.
turn. Okay, cool.
I
Do you
checked.
want to go first?
I do. I really do. Because
There
I
you
feel
go.
like the people are now hanging, gripped to the edge of their seats, waiting for my story. Anyway, in case you didn't realize, I will be talking about Rasputin. So Grigori Rasputin, who I'm fairly certain is a name that most people know, although he's not. Technically, I guess it doesn't. Oh, no, he was murdered. So yeah, it falls into the true crime community.
Yeah.
But I've personally always been fascinated with the story of Rasputin and just the Romanov family. I guess it was definitely instilled in me from a young age from the Disney movie Anastasia. But there's also a few oddities around the actual Grigori Rasputin, around his death, and I guess his rise to power within the Russian aristocracy.
Yep.
Really
Great.
stumbled with that
Yep.
word for a second.
Fantastic.
So first of all, I would like to say, clearly I'm not a historian, so I have done my best
Could you tell?
in researching this, but I haven't dedicated my life to studying Grigori Rasputin. So if there are some details incorrect,
Yeah, look, guys,
or
this
some
is...
things I've missed,
You come here for us and us being profoundly unprofessional.
yeah.
We're not historians.
You come for the puns, but you stay for the true crime.
Exactly.
So I also apologize for any potential wrongful Russian pronunciations, because
Mm-hmm.
as I'm sure you can imagine, there are a lot of them.
You do get a lot of Russian too.
Yeah, I
You do a lot of
do.
cases with Russian.
I
and
do.
it's
So
not
I
your
try and
strongest.
help myself out by writing the words phonetically.
Yeah.
But, Russian is a hard
Oh yeah.
language.
Yeah. You should try doing some more French cases.
Maybe. I can say French words, okay.
Yeah,
Anyway,
je
let's
m'appelle.
get into it. So Rasputin was born to a peasant family on the 21st of January 1869. FYI, he was an Aquarius. So he was born in a small village along the Tura River called Pokrovskyo. I think I said that right. And his parents were Anna and Yekim. So Rasputin was born to a family of 7 children, all of whom had died within their infancy. So already he was kind of a bit of a miracle child. But aside from that, there's really not a lot to glean from his childhood. It seems fairly normal aside from there are loads of stories about him being like a naughty, unruly young boy that would like steal things and just kind of cause general mishaps.
Right.
But also a lot of the stories that you hear about him are kind of shrouded in the infamy and mystery and magic of his own legend. So it's kind of like any of the more wild stories of him as a kid are kind of like, was that true? Or did you make that up because you thought he was a wizard?
Yeah.
However, it is widely accepted that he was mostly illiterate as a child and had a bit of criminal sort of upbringing, drinking, stealing, and just generally being a bit of a shithead. So in 1886, he met his future wife, Praskovya, and after a few months, they were married. In 1897, Rasputin's interest in religion was forged anew, and he left his wife and family, at that stage they had 2 children, to go on a pilgrimage. Stories of why he actually left the town have been varied, with some saying that he left under the guise of a spiritual awakening, when in actual fact a lot of people think it was to avoid charges for stealing horses.
Which makes sense.
Being like, oh, honey, I'm going to go pray.
Yeah. I'm going to go get
like-
some cigars.
And you're like, why? And you're like, just...
Just, look, if any cops come around, just say I'm fucking praying, all right?
They
Jesus
ask me
Christ.
about horses. I know nothing. So at this stage, he is 28 and he's been married to his wife for a decade. He finds his way to a holy monastery in Verkhotia, where he remained for several months. He eventually returned home, where everyone says he's a changed man. His physical appearance has changed dramatically. He looks much more disheveled and unruly. He's got kind of longer hair, a big beard. He quits drinking and adopts a vegetarian lifestyle. And it's at this stage that he begins to be given the moniker the Mad Monk. Most of his time is spent praying and singing, and he spends the next few years engaging in a nomadic lifestyle, leaving his family for months at a time to wander the countryside and visit various holy sites. During the early 1900s, word of his popularity had begun to spread, and across the years he had built up a small circle of dedicated followers who comprised of his own family members and villagers in the small town he lived in, and they prayed with him, eventually building their own makeshift chapel where they held secret prayer meetings away from the suspicious eyes of the local priests and other villagers. So at this time, the main religion in Russia and Siberia, where Grigori was born, is Russian Catholic Orthodox.
Right.
So, very old school, as a lot of Catholic religions are.
Yes, yeah.
So Rasputin quickly builds up suspicions of being a cult leader, with rumors of sexual orgies, self-flagellation, which is like self-whipping. They start to kind of circle around him and the group that he's amassed. Despite all these rumors, though, he slowly makes his way up the ranks, despite having no formal upbringing in the Russian Orthodox Church. He's just kind of a lot of reports and documents on him say that he was a very charismatic man. So he
Just a
essentially
maverick.
charmed his way
Gotcha.
through the ranks. And he develops a reputation as a holy man who can solve people's sort of spiritual issues. He eventually works his way up enough to be moved to St. Petersburg, which is the main city of Russia, where he's introduced to even more leaders within the church. One of the leaders, Theophan, is so impressed that he invites Rasputin to live with him in his home, and he quickly becomes one of Theophan's most powerful and influential friends, climbing further and further up the ladder. So we're at a time in Russia's history where the aristocratic society is becoming increasingly bored, and their interests are branching out from, that very staunch Russian Catholic into spiritualism, increasingly more interested in the occult and the supernatural. So Rasputin's interesting beliefs and his odd behavior kind of make him almost like a sideshow attraction within the kind of higher up ranks of the Russian family. So Rasputin finally meets the Tsar.
The Tsar?
The Tsar. Wow.
There you go.
Finally meets the Tsar in 1905 at the palace. And according to records found in his diary, Nicholas was immediately taken with Rasputin, calling him a man of God. In 1906, he meets the Tsar again alongside his family, and this is essentially where the story that we all know from the history books and the Disney movie kind of takes off. So one of the Tsar's children, Alexei, had a rare blood disorder which we now know as haemophilia. So essentially it means you are prone to getting internal bleeds and your blood doesn't clot very easily. So if you get a cut, it just doesn't really stop bleeding.
Which is, I believe, is what the royal family have in their genetics as
so
well.
it was a genetic disease, but Alexei, their youngest son, had it very, very bad.
Yeah.
So Alexandra, the Tsar's wife, believed that Rasputin was helping to heal Alexei, and her family developed incredibly close ties with him. And his, quote, powers do actually seem to work. There are 2 recorded occasions on which Alexei had developed life-threatening bleeds, and after praying for him, Alexei seems to heal. Doctors at the time are unable to explain the miracles, and even today, historians say that the miraculous recoveries remain one of the biggest mysteries of the Rasputin legend. The Tsar's sister, Grand Duchess Olga, wrote that she observed Rasputin healing Alexei by kneeling at the foot of his bed and praying. The calming atmosphere that he created in the palace may have assisted with the recovery, but some people have also said that what could have actually been the potential biggest aid was that he encouraged the family not to give Alexei medicine, like traditional medicine.
Right.
So at the time, penicillin or aspirin was a very newfound thing that was all the rage and kind of it was seen as a cure-all. Like, you got a cut, you took aspirin. You had a fever, you took aspirin, which is a blood thinning agent. So a lot of people think at the time that him simply telling them to stop shoving aspirin down Alexei's throat probably assisted with his already fucked up blood not getting made thinner by the constant aspirin in his system.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So his healing of the Tsar's son shoots him into kind of legendary status, and he's granted an enormous amount of power and status within the court. As his influence grows, it kind of snowballs, so he keeps making more powerful friends, and then through those friends he meets more powerful friends, and he's suddenly kind of got this status as like the Tsar's right-hand man. A lot of people said allegedly that he was the one that would smuggle Nicholas cocaine, because the Tsar allegedly had a wild coke.
Interesting.
He was a coke fiend.
Right.
And Rasputin would be the one that would get him coke and
Which
opium.
already you've healed his son through miraculous means. You're dependent on this man because he's giving you coke.
Yeah.
Like, fucking has influenced his way into this system.
Yeah, and a lot of people have also speculated that Rasputin could have potentially used hypnosis on Nicholas to kind of gain his trust and move up through the ranks. That's kind of...
I don't think he needs it. I think he's already done
I think he was
quite
just
a
very
bit.
charismatic,
Yeah.
and he fed him drugs.
I mean, we all know of people just like that in today's world who are just so charismatic they just find their way into something.
Yeah. So he's in this very, very high point of power within the Russian royal family, essentially. However, traditionalists within the church hate him, and as his followers grow, so does his opposition. So Rasputin presented himself in the imperial court as a holy man, despite having no formal affiliation with the Russian Orthodox Church. And he kind of spoke as a self-appointed representative of the peasants, having that he'd come from one. But his behavior away from the court kind of offered a very different picture. He was often drunk and had affairs with women despite being married for a very long time and having children. He kind of he picked whoever. He'd sleep with court women, he'd sleep with sex workers. He kind of seemed to have no qualms where he went, and it was basically a scandal. He appeared to bask in the fame, though, showing off shirts embroidered for him that had been given to him by the Empress and inviting her friends and servants back to his home in his hometown. By 1907, the Tsars, their secret police and higher-ups within the church absolutely despise him and label him as a heretic. As well, the press would have a field day spreading rumours about him as far as they could, actually based off some laws that the Tsar Nicholas himself had brought in for freedom of press. So they're like, cool, we can say whatever the fuck we want about this dude.
Right.
So they called him a pedophile, they accused him of rape, and then a governess within the court accused Rasputin of rape, and his closeness with the young Grand Duchesses is seen to many as inappropriate. So the Grand Duchess being Anastasia.
Yeah.
So although letters released between the Grand Duchesses and Rasputin that they would send to each other when he would return home seemed to kind of support that the relationship was entirely harmless and he thought of them like his own children and they thought the same of him. The most famous of the Grand Duchesses wrote to him, "My dear, precious, only friend, how much I should like to see you again. You appeared to me today in a dream. I am always asking Mamma when you will come. I think of you always, my dear, because you are so good to me." However, rumors persist and the growing hatred of Rasputin gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally, on the 12th of July 1914, Rasputin suffers his first assassination attempt. A young woman named Chionya, who was a follower of a priest who had previously supported Rasputin, stabs him in the stomach. And this is kind of where his legend begins. So he's stabbed in the stomach and seriously wounded, and for a time many believed that he would die, but after a lengthy hospital stay, he recovers completely. After the first failed attempt, a group assembles to try and do the job properly, led by Prince Felix Yusupov and followed by a group of right-wing politicians. They form a plan to try and kill him. Little is known about what actually happened on the evening of Rasputin's death, so it ranges from very boring, which was he got shot and he died, to very, very exciting, which is they stabbed him and they poisoned him and they shot him and they tried to set him on fire and this dude just would not die. There is a widely accepted plan of events that was given by Yusupov himself, but a lot of people have also said that this story of what happened wasn't released until he wrote a book. So a lot of people are like, you made this up to sound exciting to sell books.
Yeah.
So on December 30th, 1916, Rasputin is invited to the home of Felix Yusupov, where he's led to the basement. He's given tea and cakes which had reportedly been laced with cyanide. He eats multiples of them over the evening, and Yusupov is surprised when he appears completely affected by the cyanide. He's plied with wine, which is also laced with cyanide, and at around 2:30 a.m., Rasputin appears entirely unaffected despite the fact they've been giving him poison all night. Yusupov retrieves his gun and goes back downstairs, telling Rasputin that he'd better look at the crucifix and say a prayer. He then shoots him once in the chest, and thinking that he is dead, him and his conspirators leave for several hours. When they return to dispose of Rasputin's body, he leaps to his feet, tackling Yusupov and chasing him out of the house into the courtyard before being shot again, this time killing him. Rasputin's body is then dumped off the side of the Petrovsky Bridge. Some reports said that when the body was autopsied, no poison was found in his system, however. Initially, reports said when his body is pulled from the river, he had water in his lungs, indicating that he was still alive, despite multiple gunshot wounds. Although this has kind of been debated. So some people say he had water in his lungs, indicating despite being shot 3 times and poisoned, he was still alive when they dumped him in the river. And some people say, no, he had no water. He died from the guns. Although Rasputin was dead, the last of his prophecies was yet to unfold. Shortly before his death, he'd written to the Tsar Nicholas to predict that if he were killed by government officials, the entire imperial family would be killed by the Russian people. 15 months later, his prophecy comes true when the Tsar, his wife, and all their children are murdered by assassins amidst the Russian Revolution.
Damn.
Finally, the last tidbit that has contributed to the strange legend of Grigori Rasputin: when he was burned on his funeral pyre, multiple accounts said the body sat up in the flames, eyes wide open, before finally succumbing to the flames. A lot of people have said this can be very easily explained. Apparently, when you burn bodies, the tendons and muscles, as the body starts to burn, get tighter and constrict. So traditionally, you're supposed to cut any major tendons so they don't shorten and make the body literally sit up in death.
Yeah.
Because it's just so constricted. I read something online that said it's very common in places like India, where they do traditional funeral pyres, that people around will have like wooden, it's so common that these bodies sit up, they have wooden bats to like push the bodies back down.
Sort of like a curling process.
Yeah, but obviously, with all of the strangeness around his death, the fact that all these people are like, wow, this guy's finally dead. And then he sits up in the fire
Yeah,
and they're like,
yeah.
what the actual fuck?
It's the one thing after
You
another.
were supposed to be dead. What?
Yeah.
What?
Especially like the rumors of poison, gunshots, drowning, and then that
Yeah.
in itself, the prophecy as well, like that's insane.
So a lot of people speculate that the story of what actually happened to him was far less exciting, that they just took him to a basement and shot him. And then this Prince Felix kind of spun this amazing story in order to sell more books.
Just plausible.
But it is much funner to think that this amazing mystical man who kind of worked his way up from a peasant to one of the most powerful religious men in Russia
Yeah.
is kind of an amazing story.
It's kind of fucked up too that just someone who really made a name for themselves and made something of themselves from seemingly nothing is just sort of shut down for that fact. It's very like, you know, Martin Luther King-esque.
Yeah, well, I don't... a lot of people kind of question why, like, what was his ulterior motive to getting so close to the Tsar and potentially lying to them. So I don't necessarily know if he was a great stand-up guy.
Which is fine, but it seems like for the most part these people just didn't like him because he was a peasant.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of like, that's kind of gross. Like, yeah, like, I mean, it seems like he kind of just was digging the vibe of being a very influential person and being highly religious. But yeah, it's, I don't know. If he's sleeping around with women and getting drunk and all the while toting this sort of religious profile, it does sort of pull it all into question somewhat.
But and also another little tidbit. In 2019, there was a big police bust that happened through the dark web for a Austrian cocaine ring. They were operating under the name of Rasputin for Cocaine. That was their dark web shop name.
Right.
So they kind of had this coke ring, and their profile picture is like a GIF image of Rasputin. So,
Okay.
very interesting.
Someone's majored in marketing, yeah, or
So,
history. Yeah. Who knows? Well, there you go. That was actually very interesting and very informative because I've always heard of, like, you know, the story of Rasputin and, you know, obviously the Disney story and whatnot, but that's, now I have like all the facts to put to a name and a face.
But I found it very interesting that Disney chose to go down the pipeline of somehow the Tsar's family had murdered him, and so he was coming back from the dead to like wreak revenge on Anastasia. And I'm like, well, actually, they had nothing to do with him dying. Like,
Yeah,
they were
but-
fucked over by the Russian people
I
as
mean,
well.
Disney has a history of taking a story and completely spinning it into...
Yeah.
I mean, even to this day with Marvel, it's like they're taking comic book stories and they're like, let's just do something different with that. You know, that is a very Disney trope to do. You know
But
what
yeah,
I mean?
that's the real story of Grigori
Yeah.
Rasputin,
There you go. There you
the
go.
Mad Monk.
Mad Monk, which is also a cool name. to
Isn't
give.
it? Isn't
yeah,
it very
that's
cool?
just very cool. All right, we'll take a short break, and when we get back, we'll dive into my case. Yeah. All right,
We're
welcome back. We
Got
are
a little
back.
wine refill.
Yes, if you are listening at home, it's probably in the morning when you're listening to this, so don't drink wine during the morning, or, you know,
Or
do it if you want.
We don't judge.
Yeah, we don't give it. We don't really if you do want to do whatever you want to do. If you are listening at home and you got nothing to do, you're just chilling out. Maybe it's been a hard day. Just pour yourself a little glass of wine. We're drinking a very fancy wine that we got from this service that provides different bottles.
Naked Wines. If you ever want to sponsor us. I have no idea what this wine is called, but it's delicious. It came with a cork, which always I think is so fancy.
I tend to find corked wines generally pretty decent.
I wonder if they are actually better if it's just like the placebo effect of being like, ooh.
No,
it's fancy.
That's pretty decent.
Yeah, it is really
I do
nice.
like that one.
It tastes like Ribena.
Yeah, it's
for
just
adults.
good grape juice. Anyway, I have another Australian story for us this week, and it's a pretty intense one and features kind of there's a bit of a badass sort of moment in it that really sort of pins things together.
Okay.
But without any further ado, I am talking about Paula Denyer, who was born on the 14th of April 1972 to British immigrants' parents Anthony and Maureen Denyer in Campbelltown, New South Wales. Now, for purposes of telling the full story here, I will be referring to Paula as such, though I do need to mention just because during the events of this case, Paula was identifying as a male who was born as Paul Charles Denyer. And as you know, we are an LGBT-friendly podcast, so I won't be focusing too much on their dead name, and I will be referring to them as they, them. But during these events, and it's important to know that this was as Paul that were doing these things. I just want to point that out. So their parents had immigrated to Australia in 1965, eventually settling in Melbourne. Due to their difficulties finding their place within the community, Denyer grew up without many friends and grew up with self-confidence issues, especially with their subsequent weight gain. And by the age of 11, Denyer had slashed the throat of a teddy bear owned by their sister and slit the throat of the family cat before hanging it up on a tree. So we're not off to a good start. At 13, they were arrested for stealing a car, and then later at 15, they were arrested again for assaulting another student. After leaving school, they also had issues with keeping jobs, having been fired at least 7 times, and eventually they tried to join the Victorian police, but they failed the physical. Which is insane to me to think that police in Australia have a physical.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about.
Some of the
assume they must.
Some of the cops you see driving around are like 60 years old.
Well, I guess once you pass the physical, maybe you don't have to ever.
Which is kind of fucking weird to be like,
know.
you passed it once, you're probably good.
Yeah.
Don't work on your cardio, it's fine. I feel it's so at this age, Denyer had began an interest in stalking and assaulting women. So over 5 months in 1993, Denyer would stalk the suburbs of Frankston looking for women. As far back as it's known, the first incident happened in February 1993. Denyer had broken into the unit of Donna Vans living in Seaford. This, along with several disturbing phone calls left, Vans would soon become afraid of being alone in her room and in a unit. So arriving home at 1 a.m. after being out of the house for just about an hour with her boyfriend, they came home to find their cat dead with its throat slashed, along with images of female pornography and a message written in blood on the wall saying, "Donna, you're dead." Now, unsurprisingly, Donna yeets the fuck out of that unit and moves in with her sister, who, funnily enough, lived in the unit next to Denyer's.
Oh, okay.
The 18-year-old Elizabeth Stevens came from Tasmania in January 1993 to study at TAFE in Frankston in Melbourne. If you don't know what TAFE is, for our American listeners, it's basically like a secondary education.
I don't know what the equivalent would be, like community college,
maybe? I guess so, yeah. It's basically one step behind university, or, a bit more accessible for people who don't have a degree in universities. Sort of, it's more so for like trades, I guess, institutions,
Shorter courses,
courses.
yeah.
Yeah, I took one for music, and that got me into university, for reference. But anyway, she was living in Langwarren with her auntie and uncle. On Friday the 11th of June 1993, she got on a bus stopping on Cranbourne Road. Her family had expected her home around 8 p.m., but when she did not return, they began to worry. At 10 p.m., her uncle got into his car and began searching for her, with no success, so they eventually contacted police around 1 a.m. Due to bad weather, searches were unsuccessful, and she wasn't found until the next morning by a man noticing her partially concealed in Lloyd Park Reserve. She had been strangled, stabbed, and her throat had been slashed, and a crisscross pattern had been carved into her chest. Thursday, 8th of July, about a month later, 41-year-old Rosa Toth was coming off of Seaford Railway Station and walking home along Railway Parade. At around 5:50 p.m, she was walking past Seaford North Reserve when she noticed a man lingering around the toilet block. Shortly after passing him, she was attacked and dragged off into the park. The man was holding a gun to her head, but she noticed that it was a fake, so she feigned submission until she found a chance to run away and escape, and she did just that.
Smart girl.
Yeah. She then flags down a driver, and she returns back to the road. And the driver who picks her up drives her home. On the very same night, 22-year-old Deborah Freem was abducted in her car. She had left her newborn child home with a friend while she went off on a short trip to pick up some milk. She left the house around 7 p.m, and though at 8 p.m. she still had not returned, so her friend contacted Deborah's boyfriend. Together they drove around looking for her, and this proved unsuccessful, so they reported her missing to Frankston police. It wasn't until a few days later, on the afternoon of Monday, 12th of July, that a farmer found Deborah's partially covered body on Taylor's Road. Just like Elizabeth Stevens, she had been strangled, stabbed, and her throat had been slashed. Then on Friday, the 30th of July, a 17-year-old student, Natalie Russell, was attacked on her way home from school at John Paul College. Important to notice that at this time, as there had been 2 confirmed murders and 1 attempted murder and assault, this was met with a lot of media coverage, and all the schools are telling students to be careful on their way home. Parents are telling them to, walk in pairs, everything like that.
Freaking out.
This is in Frankston. I mean, it's just a big deal. Despite this, Natalie took her usual shortcut home to Frankston Road, which is a fenced walkway that passes between 2 golf courses on Sky Road. She was reported missing at 8 p.m, and soon after, her body was found through a large hole in a wire fence from the walkway. As with the other victims, she was found killed in a similar fashion: strangled, stabbed, throat slashed. However, the badass that she is, 17-year-old Natalie puts up a fucking fight. Gets DNA everywhere around the scene. Not everywhere, but she leaves DNA behind from this attacker, which is just fucking amazing. Since the murder of Elizabeth Stevens, police began a large-scale hunt to find the person responsible. This only served to escalate as the more and more attacks were happening. With no external forensic evidence found at either Stevens or Freem's murders connecting the 2 attacks with the attack from the description Ros Toff was able to give, this gave police a general a profile to sort of work with to form a suspect profile. They deduced that they were dealing with a male, likely unemployed or working a menial job, living locally, aged between 18 to 24, average looking, and living alone. Near the track on Sky Road where Natalie Russell was murdered, a post person, I don't know what the term is for that. Delivery person?
Delivery.
I believe it was a woman.
Postwoman.
Just
call it postie.
Sure.
A postie.
A postie was noticed a rusted yellow Toyota Corona, missing its number plates with a man inside using binoculars. As she was on her way to call the police at a nearby house, she noticed that Natalie was walking towards the track alone, and the man was soon observing her and ran up the tracks soon after. Police arrived to that area on the day that Natalie had actually been murdered, and they noted the registration label number on the car and checked a few houses nearby, knocking on the doors. But ultimately, they got another call and they left before the man would return back to his car.
Mm-hmm.
Later on in this investigation, 3 holes were found in the fence on the walkway, cut with the same tool and with blood traces on one of the holes. They also found skin and hair traces, though after forensics were found, they found not to be belonging to Natalie or any of the other victims. Eventually, the registration details led investigators to the suspicious car owner, a person by the name of Paul Charles Denyer. Detectives visited Denyer's small unit at 186 Frankston Dandenong Road in Seaford the afternoon of 31st of July, a unit they shared with their then-girlfriend and next door to Donna Vane's sister. Denyer admitted to being within the general vicinity of both the Freem and Russell murders at the time of their murders and was taken to Frankston Police Station. At 9:20 p.m. they were interviewed by investigators, and Denyer had no solid argument for why they were in the vicinity of the murders, nor the cuts and scratches they had on them. And Denyer they admitted to having their DNA taken, and this then led them to think, well, if they have my DNA, it's only a matter of time before they link my DNA to the crime. So they fully admitted to all the murders, including the assault on Rosa Toth and the slasher break-ins. So Denyer told detectives that they had been stalking women for years and that they had desires to kill from the age of 14 due to a general hate towards women. Denyer was subsequently charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of abduction, which they later pled guilty to and did not contest. Denyer was determined not legally insane, though they were determined to have a sadistic personality disorder. On the 20th of December 1993, Denyer was sentenced to 3 consecutive sentences of life imprisonment with no parole, though later through an appeal they lodged and was heard in July 1994, they were granted a non-parole period of 30 years. This would be up to 2023. So in less than 2 years, they can apply for parole.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is kind of fucked up. In April 2013, the Herald Sun created a website containing images of letters written by Denyer in 2003 and 2004 to another inmate titled the Paul Denyer Letters, which, let me just point out something that's kind of fucking weird.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So and those, I don't know if there's a Herald Sun anywhere else besides Australia, but that is a publication, news outlet. Weird that they created an entire fucking website for this. Anyway, in these letters, Denyer claims that they had suffered from gender dysphoria for most of their life. And in the very first letter, dating 29th of November 2003, Denyer began identifying as female of that same year. So their gender dysphoria and them believing that they're not male is what they think led them to commit such murders as an, quote, act of revenge against women or assigned female at birth women. Since then, Denyer has attempted to wear women's clothing and makeup while in prison, which they do not allow, and has also appealed for sex reassignment surgery, which also has been rejected. As has been told through people in the general support groups and at prisons, they believe that Denyer truly does feel that they are female and wants to go through with the surgery, which, you know, is a big step and a pretty clear sign that someone has, you know,
gender dysmorphia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't talk too much on it because it is a murderer and I don't necessarily want to talk about it that much.
And we're also not experts on the subject by
exactly. So they're like the families of some victims have called this like sick and a stunt. I won't really go into that because I don't want to say anything like that. I do want to point out though that the passing where Natalie Russell walked through, the track where she was murdered, has now been renamed Nat's Track in her memory.
Oh, I like that.
So if you are in that area in Frankston North, which passes through 2 golf courses on Sky Road, that little pass there is now known as Nat's Track. She is a fucking badass 17-year-old schoolgirl who fought back and ultimately led investigators to find out who this was, along with
it was the DNA evidence.
The DNA evidence was, incidentally, it was what led Denya to be like, "Oh fuck, they've got me."
Yeah.
Before they even really nailed him with it.
Yeah, they were like, they're going to link the DNA.
But
now.
it is, if it got to that point where he was where they were denying it, you know, it would come to the point where like, well, we have your fucking DNA and we've run tests.
Yeah.
You know. But still, just fucking badass. And all props to the male woman who saw something weird happening.
Yeah,
and
reported it.
Called the fucking police.
Yeah.
Which is just such a weirdly minuscule thing that you get
It's what
in
you
these
need
cases.
to do. Like, that's the thing. It's like, we've said this a few times on this show. It's like, call the cops, apologize later. Like, if you see a dude or a woman, but let's be real, mainly dudes.
Yes, let's be real.
Acting sketchy, like...
Look, he was in a car with fucking binoculars. Now, look, you can explain that to the cops later on that you're just bird watching. That's fine. No harm, no foul. It is what it is. Maybe don't fucking sit in the car with binoculars.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Like, that's fucking weird. Maybe go to nature and watch some birds there. But, like, if you see someone with binoculars in a fucking car, probably call the police immediately.
Just call the cops, apologize later.
Yeah, especially when there's been 2 fucking murders and an attempted murder.
Yeah, 100%.
And you see a schoolgirl walking alone. Like, she did the perfect thing.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is somewhat of a rare thing in these cases, unfortunately. But, you know, I did think that was very nice that they renamed the track Nat's Track. If I'm ever in Frankston again, I might check it out. Pay my respects. But yeah, rest in peace to all the victims who suffered at the hand of this person. It is horrible that something like this happened. And, you know, it's they have said that they have done it because of they said in their first initial reason was for a general hatred of women. Next, it was a jealousy of women being, you know, AFAB.
Yeah.
Women. And later it was... So it's this weird sort of thing. It's like, I don't really know. I can't really deduce or figure why this sort of happened. Because even at the early...
You're never going to know why.
But even at the early stages of, like, slashing throats of toys and...
It's very violent.
Of a cat at, like, the age of 11...
Yeah.
You know.
It seems like there was some, sadistic qualities.
Yeah, which, you know,
from the get-go.
There might have been like, if someone had gotten in there with some sort of doctor or mental health check, like could have been prevented.
Yeah.
You know, you never know. But anyway, that is the case of Paula Denya, a very, very, very hard to read case. But yeah, there you go.
I think that just about sums up the main portion of the show.
Yes.
So if you're new around here, we run through the stories that we're covering for the week, and then Tama and I just basically shoot the shit for a little bit at the end. So for those of you who just come for the true crime, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you on Friday for our bonus On the Rocks episode. For those of you who stick around, welcome.
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 This has been a relatively somber episode because I think we're both like just a bit exhausted.
We're both very tired, so I
Yeah.
feel like that usually makes for pretty funny content at the end when we're
Yeah,
both
it
tired.
does
And
when we're just losing our
we're
fucking minds.
delirious.
Yeah.
And I've had a glass of wine, so that's really adding to the whole sleepy, sleep vibes.
Yeah. And I just got back from my first class back to kickboxing.
In like 4 months.
Yeah, which has thoroughly kicked my ass.
And I went for a run, so I'm tired.
Yeah.
It's just it's a tired.
It's a tired episode. Look, get in your PJs. No matter what time of day it is.
I don't care what time. If you're in your car, turn around.
Go home. Get
Put
in
your
your
pajamas
PJs.
on. It's a no bones day.
It's a no bones day. Get your blanket out. Wrap yourself up. Make a little cup of tea, maybe peppermint tea or whatever kind of tea you like drinking, and just chill out.
Yeah.
Listen to our beautiful raspy voices. Talk
I
about.
don't know what I was gonna say.
Yeah. Since the get-go, it's been one of those episodes.
Yeah, a little bit.
It started off and you were just like...
I thought my pun was great.
It was very good.
There's no disputing. I'm doing Rasputin.
Yeah. Which if someone has opened the episode without reading the title, they're going to be like, what the fuck is happening?
Well, does what it says on the label.
That is your problem. If you haven't read the title.
Oh, I thought you were saying something's my problem. I'm like,
No.
there's nothing. It's my show, babe.
I know.
I have no problems.
It's also my show.
All right. So let's talk about controversial drag race elimination.
Oh,
what was
God.
that episode?
Yeah.
What the fuck, man?
So I think it's just sort of gets boiled down to rush development. I think, honestly, if I can think of anything, it would just be rush development. It was the same thing with Canada's first season. It's the same thing with Australia's first season. It is what it is. UK's first season.
I was just so confused by that bottom two. And anyway,
Yeah.
didn't make sense.
But it is what it is. You see it all the time with movies that come out and they've been rushed. You see it all the time with video games that have been rushed. Look, there's a franchise. There's two franchises. There's EA who do like sports games,
Yeah.
right? And every single year, for multiple titles, be it FIFA, be it wrestling, be it NFL, whatever, NHL, there'll be a game every single year. Does that sound fucking feasible?
No.
At all? No, it sounds terrible. And guess what? There's a lot of fucking issues with them every single time they come out. They did the same thing with Ubisoft with the Assassin's Creed games, where they did one a year. And you know how big those games are. You've seen me play one, I believe. Hello, Toff. Thank you for joining us for this. I guess it's a good section for you to join us.
She comes in at the end
Yeah.
sometimes. Also, thank you to Belinda for suggesting the story of Paula Denia.
Yes. Sorry, I forgot to mention that before.
And I did also notice in the case suggestions, which if you are wanting to suggest a story that we cover, it's in our link tree, which is in all of our, like the link in all of our socials. And it's just a shared Google Doc and you just pop a little bullet point of what you wanted to cover. I noticed that Elle has requested we cover the Hatpin murders, which is John and Sarah Mankin. We have actually already done that episode. So, do I know the episode number? No.
Was it a good episode?
I'm going to find it out right now for you.
Do we know if it was a good episode? No.
I don't remember. I mean, it was a while ago.
Whereabouts in our episode list was it? And I'll be able to tell you.
So, we covered that on March 9th, 2021. It was in an episode I covered Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, and Tama did John and Sarah Mankin.
Ah, yes.
So if you are interested in hearing the Hatpin murders, you're in luck.
Guess
you
what?
You don't have to wait. We've already done it.
It's there.
Sometimes I forget that we've done literally like 60 episodes of this show.
I know. It's fucked up. And I'm waiting for the day where like one day I'll be like
we're like,
writing
there's
notes.
no more murders to talk
Well, no,
about.
I'll be like writing notes and I'll be like, Sounds weirdly familiar.
We've already done
Yeah,
this.
have I ever done this before? And you know what is also funny? Every single episode we've done this, the countless amount of episodes we've done, we have never done the same case.
No. Well, we kind of half talk about it before we...
Well, sometimes, yeah, but
Well,
like
I
for
always
the most
ask
part,
you who you're doing for that exact reason, because I would punch myself in the face if I went and did
True.
hours of research.
well, typically we'll have like one that we want to cover, and then it'll be like we'll know that we want to do it, and then we talk about it, and then it's like it's never been a case where we've been like, oh, I was doing that.
No.
Is what I more so mean.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, back to Drag Race. I just think it's literally just that. I think it's just rush
Yeah,
production.
it's just weird. It feels like they're trying to really push a storyline, and it feels like they keep getting in these really campy, avant-garde, over-the-top queens like Charity, and then they're like, we want you to do glam. And it's like, but that's not their drag. Like, I understand that there's doing something different, but then there's doing something that is just not your drag. So why would she do that? Like, she's not going to come out in like a Kennedy Davenport beautiful face, beautiful hair gown, because that's not her. The same way that Kennedy wouldn't come out on the runway with some crazy prosthetic goblin nose. Interesting about the goblin thing though, a lot of people kind of called her out for saying it was probably unintentionally anti-Semitic because of World War II. There are a lot of caricatures of Jewish people portrayed as these like money-hungry goblins with the really big noses.
Right. I don't think that was what she was going for.
Oh, no, but she just addressed it in her Instagram post when she was like, thanks for my run on the show. P.S. Like, that's not what I meant at all.
Yeah, I find
I'm really sorry if I offended anyone.
That's so bizarre if someone would look at that and go, oh, they're making fun of this.
I don't
really
think anyone, like, I
thing
think
from
most
World War
people
II.
knew it was unintentional, but they
Yeah.
were like, hey, just like FYI, maybe don't do the big nose when you're talking about money.
Okay.
I think it was specifically the context of the challenge being like all to do with riches and money.
Yeah.
And then the nose where people were a bit like, oh, maybe don't do that again. Ooh.
It is a bit. It's a bit of a tricky one because I feel I do like the concept of having someone who does something a bit different, but in Drag Race itself, it's such a thing of like, show us that you're versatile. You know, like show us that you can do.
But they'll and the next
stuff.
breath they'll be like, but show us Charity, and she's like, bitch. What the fuck do you think I've been doing? But then you told me to show versatility, so I did something else.
Which is something that they did so perfectly well in earlier seasons. Like, I think season 6, around that sort of era, it was like, you'd had queens like Adore who were like, I don't really fucking know who I am.
Yeah.
And then throughout the season, like they get to the end, like final 3, I believe. Adore was in
final 2.
final
3.
Final 3.
Oh yeah, final 3, sorry.
And throughout that season, you sort of see a growth of like, I don't really cinch my body. I don't really do this. I don't really do that. And then like you see by the end of the season, it's like, fuck, she's done really well. And she's grown and she's sort of found her own thing. And then in All Stars, she comes in, she's like,
I don't actually want to change.
I know who I am.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really want to fucking do this.
Yeah.
You know, I think in a sense, like what you're looking for on these shows are people who have established themselves, but are also looking to find themselves in a sense.
Yeah.
Which is why it was so easy to have that in the earlier seasons, you know, because drag was, you know, less known than it is now.
Yeah, it's very mainstream.
There were less queens, and now we're getting to the stages of like it being like music or any sort of artistry where it's like, here's my niche, because we don't want to have 50 pageant queens on one season. You know what I mean? Like,
but then there's some niches that they don't really seem to appreciate as much.
That's
as
what I
others.
mean. I think
Yeah.
they're just not factoring in that
But,
thing, because you also have Rue, who's like a very traditional drag queen who doesn't necessarily reward new styles of drag.
yeah, it does seem a bit like that. Anyway.
Yeah.
In very smart news,
Ooh.
they've officially... So one of my favourite series, Akatar, which is being adapted into a television show, which I'm very excited about.
Wow.
It's officially moved from being scripted. They've started filming. So no details on the cast or the release date have been released, but it's very exciting to know that they're actually filming.
All right. What if they cast your favorite character and it's nothing like how you imagined it?
I mean, I'm always willing to give adaptations a try because I think necessarily sometimes the appearance of a character isn't the most important thing. Like, it's the personality and the energy that they exude.
Yeah.
Like, it probably, for instance, Vampire Diaries is, I didn't read the books, but I was obsessed with the television series.
I didn't even know there were books.
Yeah, it's based off books.
Right.
So Elena, the main heroine, is supposed to be blonde hair, blue eyes in the books.
Right.
But like Nina Dobrev did such a fantastic job of
yeah.
portraying Elena. It's like, had I read the books, yeah, sure, I probably would have been a bit like taken aback when I was like, oh, all these years I've been reading these books, I've been picturing someone with blonde hair, blue eyes, and now I've got this brunette bitch. But, she does a fantastic job of like exuding that character. So would I maybe be would it be a bit jarring to suddenly have someone look so different? Yes, I do think as long as my main thing is get the story right. I would be happy to have characters that look the exact opposite of what I thought they were going to if it's a good script and it's a good adaptation and they nail the story.
Yeah, who's done that pretty well has been The Witcher Netflix series so far. I can tell you as someone who's played the games and read the books, it's been pretty fucking spot on so far.
So yeah, I am very excited for them to release the casting, mainly for one particular character that I can dribble over a little bit, which I will be a little bit upset if they fuck up his casting. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Tama
has agreed to read the book, which I'm very excited.
Yeah, when I'm done the latest Song of Ice and Fire books.
Look, you're really going to take a tumble from some excellent high fantasy to some
very smart.
It's not really that smutty, to be honest. You really don't get into the full smart until you get to the 5th book, and you got a while to go.
Gotcha.
The first book I don't think has any sex scenes. The second book has like a couple, but they're right at the end. The third book is fantastic in terms of plot. I got to the point where I was like, I don't even care if there's no sex because I'm just so enthralled in this
invested
plot.
in the story.
But yeah, I'm very excited because I've been rereading. So I just finished rereading the second book for the 85th time. Got like a weird book hangover. I'm like, I need something as good as this series or I'll just keep rereading this.
Yeah, that's the thing. Once I finish A Song of Ice and Fire, I'm like, I don't know what I want to get into. Like,
maybe that's why Akatar will be good for you because it's so different. It'll just like...
Well, yeah, and I also need to finish off the Witcher series because I haven't finished off the Witcher books at all. As you have one that our friend Noni has suggested to read as well that I will be
which also
checking
has
out.
been coming up in some videos on TikTok and it's apparently pretty good. So.
Cool. I think we'll just call it there because I'm
so tired.
Fucking tired, yeah. This has been let's call this one Under the Sheets.
That's weird.
Under the Sheets episode.
Why would we do that?
Because we're having like a sleepover party. We're all kind of like hyped. We were hyped up on sugar.
I love how you're assuming everyone else is also tired.
Just listen.
Okay.
And we watched a couple of movies, and now we're kind of like just somberly lying down in bed. And you don't go to sleep straight away. You kind of talk for a bit, and then once the talking's done, you're like, all right, I'm gonna go to sleep. That's what this is.
Okay.
So it's been fun. It's been real fun, guys.
Okay. That was a weird comparison.
Why do you have to shit on like everything I do?
I don't.
You do.
shit
You're
on
like,
everything
why are
you do.
you such a fucking idiot?
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
like, I'm just trying to like be a good host.
I love how people probably think from this show we have a terrible relationship because we just yell at each other.
This isn't a joke as well. This is
Okay.
Laura's genuinely abusing me.
Right. Cool. Okay. Well, I'm not, so...
The code word for this week. Okay. We'll just wrap it up.
Wrap this shit up.
Let's just wrap this shit up.
What's the code word?
The code word is...
Beans.
Yeah. Let's do beans.
And for once, you may be... I don't have beans in front of me. It was just literally the first word that came to my head.
Right.
I don't have like a bowl of beans in front of me because that would be really weird.
I honestly can't think of anything ever since soaking. That's just... It just lives in my brain.
And people keep tagging
it's
you
so
in
good.
videos on TikTok about
It's
it.
so good.
It's become like your weird niche thing that people know Tama from Best of Cold as the soaking guy.
Someone on TikTok was like, I can't believe this lives in my brain now. And the first thing I thought of was you while hearing this TikTok about soaking.
Oh dear. We love that. We want to embed ourselves in people's brains like that.
Anyway, code word is beans. Definitely not soaking. I think
beans.
I think it's time to put an end to the soaking chapters.
We're closing the soaking chapter.
Yeah.
And the jump humping or whatever the...
Jump humping. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, very good. You're learning.
I remembered.
Yay.
Anyway.
All right.
Thank you for joining us for another week. You can follow us on socials at the BSC Podcast. If you do have a case that you would like to suggest, head to our link tree and it's just down the bottom. It just says suggest a case and you just leave a little suggestion and we will cover it.
Yeah, we'll get to it at some point.
Eventually. But yeah, thanks for joining us for another week and we will catch you on Friday for On the Rocks. And we hope you have an excellent week.
Bye.